Thank you so much. Thank you all for being here on a cold and wet day. But hopefully in our conversation, we're going to bring you some shelter from the rain and bring you some sunlight from Bulgaria. Thank you so much, Georgi, for being here with us. And I just want to give a little bit of context to the audience that Time Shelter is the first Bulgarian translation to have won the International Booker. It was also the first Bulgarian book to even be on the long list. And it's really sort of opened the windows to Bulgarian literature, and it's been a phenomenal win. And in his country, he's an absolute hero. And they say the last time the country had a similar victory was 10 years ago when the football team made it to the Final Four, and that was back in 1994. So here we really have a superstar in our midst all the way from Bulgaria. And it's funny because we were just talking off stage and he was like, great, the rain is out, there's a marathon, and this is typical of Bulgarian luck. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about Bulgarian luck or the lack of it.
Good morning. Thank you that I'm being invited here, and thank you that you're here on the Sunday morning, Sunday rainy morning with marathon. So this is the Bulgarian luck, yeah. We love to complain, so sorry, maybe I will complain from time to time. My previous novel, the title of my previous novel is The Physics of Sorrow. When I chose this title, it was because there was an article in Economist in 2011 with the title, The Saddest Place in the World. This was a statistic of the happiness, you know this funny statistics, and we were the champions of the sorrow. We never been champions in anywhere, in any sport. But this time we were champions of the sorrow. So we love our sorrows. I think that in a way we love to be champions in something. This is the Bulgarian, this is the Bulgarian luck or Bulgarian sorrow, but the thing that I love in Bulgaria is that many Bulgarians have sense of irony and self-irony. You couldn't live in the saddest place in the world without sense of irony. So that's the thing that I love. And after Booker, yes, to answer your question, the best thing that happened in Bulgaria was that so many people were on the street. There was a poor joy after the award. So many people in Bulgaria were glad because of the book, because of Literaturpreis. And this is really a miracle. But I love, there was a taxi driver who said me, who told me, you know, I've read your book before Booker. So this is really count.
But sorrow is great material for literature, right? Happiness is not. Can you tell us, but why is there this impression that Bulgaria is the saddest country?
I don't know. As I said, it's a question of complaining, question of, we have this saying that it's not good to talk about your happiness because something will go wrong. So that's why it's better to complain, and we hope that something good will come after that. But yeah, as you said, this is a good material for writing. Because, you know, Bulgarian word for sorrow is taga, tuga. If you try to pronounce now silently, tuga, tuga, you will see how your Adam apple moves a bit. It's because you would like to swallow something. That's not easy to be said. And I like this word. It's a short word, but the feeling is slow and long. This is different from the Turkish hüzün or from the saudade, the Portuguese word. But this is another question for another book.
Wonderful. And I think moving to Time Shelter, again, it's a short title, but I think reading it is sort of this slow and long and beautiful process. So Time Shelter, just to quickly tell you all, is about clinics of the past. So there is a character called Gaustin, and he makes the clinic of the past essentially for patients suffering from Alzheimer's. So each floor of the apartment is of a different decade. So you have the 60s and you have the 70s, and it's a way for people who have memory loss, who have dementia, to just sort of feel at home. And then slowly their relatives also start living with them. And then of course the issue is, why are people fleeing to the past? And of course, I think the beautiful thing about this book is that it tells us that if you're fleeing from today, it's also because of a certain longing for the past. It's also because it's hinting at the dangers of nationalism and at the dangers of nostalgia. So I was just kind of stepping back a little bit, and I think many years ago you had a book called The Blind Vaishya, a story. And in that there's a character, and from one eye she can only see the present, and from the other eye she can only see the future. What she cannot see is the present, right? So from one eye she can see the past, the other eye she can see the future, she cannot see the present. And I think Time Shelter sort of draws from that. So maybe you can sort of explain the continuum and tell us a little bit about that.
When I wrote this short story, Blind Vaishya, and it was filmed after that, some people ask me, is it a Indian hero character? Is it connected with some Indian mythology? Maybe because the name Vaishya sounds in this way. But anyway, yeah, I'm interested in this moment. If Blind Vaishya was here, she could see with the left eye this place without us, without this tent, maybe 300 years ago. If she see this place with the right eye, she could see it also empty, without us, again without us. We are not in her blick. And, but in this moment, Blind Vaishya is really blind for the present. And for me, it was always interesting in all of my books how we deal with the past and the future. And Time Shelter I started to think about it in 2016. Exactly, I remember the year because 2016 was important year, not for a good. We had election of Trump, we had also Brexit in Europe, and for me it was clear that the past will become stronger, the past will become a weapon. Everybody will promise us the past. I'm coming from Bulgaria. When I was 20 years old, when I was in the school, it was during the time of communism. And they promised us a bright future. This was the ideology. Usually, they promised you a bright future. And I know that this check of the future is empty. Now, the politicians, the populists try to promise us the bright past. And yeah, never believe if someone promised you future or the past. All these checks are really empty. And that's why I decided to write this book. But in the beginning, the idea of Gaustin for these clinics for the past was really, I think was really good because it's a book also about Alzheimer's suffering people. You know that we are growing old and it's easy to have dementia or Alzheimer, and when we have this sick, you're going back and back in your personal history, in your personal biography. You're living in 1960s, 70s, when you were young, and that's why it could be healthy to have these floors of the past and to put in sync your internal time with the external time around of the floors of 60s or 70s or 80s. So this was the idea of Gaustin in the beginning, and I think it was a good idea. But after that, everything goes wrong.
So when you were creating this apartment and you were recreating these floors for each decade, you were of course looking at the language, you were looking at the music, you were looking at the smells. So just tell us how you created each floor and what were which would be your favorite decade to live in as well?
You know that the smell and music are very important for the memory. They are great unlockers of the memory, actually. And the last thing that will leave us when we forgot everything will be music. The music structures stay till the last moment in our brain. And that's why I decided to put in these floors the music from 60s, 70s, 80s, the smells of 60s, 70s, 80s, because every decade has its own smell. We underestimate this, but this is also very important. And all details are important for this reconstructing of the past.
I think I was reading when you wrote the book, you had a playlist of music, and there were certain songs that you listened to especially.
Yes.
And I think Hotel California was one of them.
Yeah.
You can check in, but you can never leave. What were some of the other songs?
Of course, there are many Beatles songs, because I think that, yeah, Beatles songs are a great time machine. You always are in the 60s and 70s. There is this Yesterday song, of course, because it's close to the topic. But there are also Sarabanda by Handel. It was very important for the structure of the novel. If you listen again to Sarabanda by Handel, you will see how the music moves and goes to the other levels. Also, Doors was very important. In the beginning, they are line connected Doors with W.H. Auden. The Alabama song of Doors was very important for the novel. Many songs. There is really playlist published on the book page with 12 of the songs that you can listen till reading the book.
And sort of going back, which would be a decade you would choose to live in from the past?
I was born in 1968. I pretend that I remember the whole year because I was born in the very beginning of the year. And for me, 1968 is a very important year, not only for me. And I would like to spend one afternoon in 1968. When my parents were young, when everybody was young, and Paul McCartney was young. And I really want to spend one afternoon there. But also I like 30s and 90s. 1990s were very important for my generation. It was after the fall of Berlin Wall. It was, we were 20 something, and we were so naive, and we believed that everything will change after the falling of communism for 1, 2, 3 months. And I remember how we were on the streets on the first protest, and a friend of mine said, I must say you that we will need maybe 6 months or 1 year to be a normal country. And I was, how? I couldn't wait 1 year. I'm 22. And 30 years later, we met with this friend again on the streets, again protesting. So time is strange. But also, there is this question in the novel, which decade you can choose. And one of the characters have this answer that I really like it. The answer was, I would like to be at 12 in every decade.
What were you like as a 12-year-old? What were you doing as a 12-year-old? As a 12-year-old, how were you spending your days?
When I write. In life. Is there a life without writing? No, usually I like to walk in the streets, to stay on some bench, and just to watch the people. I like this, to do this. When I'm writing, I write usually in the morning, and I like just to stay and to gaze through the window in the afternoons. I really like afternoons. I think that 3 p.m. is my favorite time because nothing happened at 3 p.m. Yeah, usually when you're sitting alone in the room, gazing through the window, there are some flies in the room. I like to write about domestic flies, and this is my favorite time. One French philosopher called this time, 3 p.m., the illness of the monasteries, because he said it's the saddest time of the day. This is the time when Jesus Christ died, 3 p.m. And that's my day, yeah. A bit writing and then 3 p.m. The whole day, 3 p.m.
You mentioned about smells and how each decade has its own smell. And I think again in the book you talk about the smell of roasting peppers, you talk about the smell of tar on the road. So again, just sort of when you think about your home country, what are the smells that come to you first?
The smell is different in different decades. In my childhood in 80s, it was the smell of hot asphalt who is melted. And also later the smells change a lot. I don't remember, by the way, the smells of last 20 years. I think that the time lost its smell in the last years. I think that we had, in the 20th century, in all decades of 20th centuries, we had some shape, smell, form, music, but I really don't remember the smell of 2010, let's say.
I think, again, when the book won the International Booker, there was a lot of conversation about Bulgarian literature. And you said how the novel is quite new to Bulgarian literature, but there is a great tradition of storytelling and poetry. So maybe you can tell the Indian audience a little bit about those traditions.
Bulgarian literature, I think we have a very strong tradition in poetry and in the short stories, and it's connected with the oral stories that our parents and grandparents love to tell. We have, I think, a strong tradition with oral stories. I used to live with my grandparents. It was typical for my generation because our parents worked in the cities, and we used to live with grandparents, and it was very important experience for us, for me especially, because my grandmother, she told me stories in a style of Gabriel Garcia Marquez or Borges. She never heard about them, but her stories were like this. I knew the stories for my neighbor who had wings under his arms, she told me, and he was very strong. And all the day I tried to see his wings. So it was a espionage, and I really believed in this. It was, what was important for me, and I tried to keep in my writing the idea that the everyday and the sublime are the same thing. Oh, they are very closely connected. If you can find the sublime in the everyday things, in the trivial things, in the banal things, you are saved. And I think that I learned this thanks to my grandmother.
I think you mentioned your grandmother, and I think there's a lovely incident about how, as a child, you used to keep getting one nightmare, and you were going to tell your grandmother about it, and she said, "Do not." Maybe you can tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, actually, it was the first thing that I wrote. I was 6, 7 years old. I used to live with my grandmother, and I had this nightmare who repeated every night. And I tried to tell it to my grandmother, but she stopped me, pressing her finger on the lips, and says that nightmares shouldn't be retold because they came alive. She said it in a more beautiful way. She said it because they will fill with blood. And that's why I didn't know what to do. I had again this nightmare, and I decided to write down. I just learned the first letters, and I decided to write down with a very ugly letters on a notebook of my grandfather. I stole it. And this was the first thing that I wrote down, and I realized that it worked. I never ever had this nightmare again. But also I never forgot it. This is the price. Yeah, that's the price. Because writing creates memory. Writing could save you from your fears. but it will create memory of your fears also. You should take the prize.
But it also perhaps started your writing career, if it was the first thing you wrote.
I decided that it's a good idea to write down your fears. And I think that even now when I'm writing, the reason of my writing, it's not different.
In the book, there's this interesting, I think the character is talking to someone in a cafe, and he says that, there's the advantage of speaking in a small language, which means that, the chances of someone understanding you.
Nobody will understand you, the neighbors.
So could you tell us a little bit more about the advantages of a small language?
Okay. It started to rain again, so I think that we can continue 2 hours. Nobody will leave.
And continue complaining.
I really like every language is beautiful. Language is very important for me because I started with poetry. I started to write poetry, and I think that I still writing poetry when I write my novel. So I smuggle poetry into my novels. It's my trick because publishers don't like to publish poetry books. And I decided that if I write novels and put some poems inside, it's a good way to transport my poetry. Beautiful sounds. I like Bulgarian language because it's a bit strange language. It's part of the Slavic languages, but with some specific characters. Only in Bulgarian and in Chinese, I don't know how, we have this sound, vocal, which is part of this important word taga, sorrow. The advantages of small languages is that they are beautiful, usually. They are very beautiful. And you can, you can share them with other people. They are really beautiful languages.
You mentioned how the phrase time shelter has now actually entered the dictionary. So again, maybe tell us or explain to us what you meant by the title time shelter, and why do you think it's actually gained so much resonance or meaning today?
Actually, the title time shelter is a neologism. It's a new word. And last week in Bulgaria, we had an annual voting for the best words, for the favorite words of the year of 2023. And time shelter was among the 3 words. Yes, and it was great because it's a title of book, and this word doesn't exist before, but now it became part of the everyday life. Why time shelter? The answer could be simple, because we are living in a deficit of future. It's like, I imagine this like we are at the airport and there is this table with the cities and the status of the flights. And the city started to roll and we have future. Yeah, good. And cancel, delay. The future is cancelled in a way, the world is cancelled. This is the feeling. That's the feeling. Nobody dream about the future anymore. We know that not so good things will wait us in the future. I think that before we had much more sense of future. 30 years before, we believed that in the future we will cure all these cancers, we will travel to the moon and so on and so on. But now I think we lost this. And when you have the deficit of future, the only direction to find shelter is in the past. And I wrote this novel because trying to say that this could be dangerous. As a writer, I love the past. All my stories, we are made of the past. All my stories are made of the stories that I've heard. But I know that it could be monsters. There are some new politicians who are like dealers of the past. I don't like them to sell me some past.
And what are the dangers when politicians, leaders sell us an idea of a golden past? Because that happens in Bulgaria, happens in India.
No, the danger is that they try to turn the past into the propaganda. I have my favorite poet, Joseph Brodsky. He says, the future is propaganda. But what we are living now looks like the past is the propaganda. The dangerous is when someone tries to invent the memories, the happy memories of the whole nation, and try to put the whole society or the whole nation into the room of the past and to lock this nation in this past. This could be really dangerous. Past is a personal thing, I believe. We do it every day. Every day we are going back to the past, to the rooms of our past. We could stay there for 1 hour, for 2 hours, but not to lock the door from inside. And this is a good traveling to the past, for the personal past. But when someone tries to put the whole society into the past, it's really dangerous. If someone promises you the bright past, it also could be dangerous. Because usually this past is invented past. And that's why in the second part of the book I have these referendums for the past. Because every country in Europe, they try to choose their happiest decade of 20th century and just to live there. But could you imagine Europe developed not in the geography, not in the territory, but in the time? And the happiest time for Germany is not the happiest time for Poland. So that's why we should be careful with the happiest times.
You mentioned, so the part of the book where this referendum is happening is fascinating because you really wonder which country is going to decide which decade. And you also look into the word referendum itself and what it means, right? And I think you could tell us about that because I didn't know that and I was like, it suddenly is quite a revelation.
I did not know as well, but when I started to write about these referendums of the past, and I checked the etymology of the referendum, which it comes from refero, transporting back or traveling back. So in the etymology of the word referendum, the past is there. The back is there, which is, I find, very interesting and it's a kind of sign.
Exactly.
Because we believe that our referendums are referendums for the future, but they could be for the past as well.
So when you were deciding which country lives in which decade?
It was hard process, actually. It was really hard process. Of course, I read about the history of every country, European countries. I talked with all people that I know from different countries. I asked them, which is the happiest decade that you think if you have referendum in Denmark, in Norway, in Sweden, you will choose. Also, because voting for the happiest decade, like every vote, is not an easy thing. It's not just logical thing. You know, you don't vote for the happiest decade because you had the big domestic product or the economy was good or something like this. No, sometimes we vote for some decades because of very personal reasons, because of irrational reasons, because of the music of this decade, because of the popular culture of this decade, because of the ABBA and Beatles. Yeah, this is also, you should count this. And it wasn't an easy process to invent which will be the happiest decade. But I checked when I had presentations in, let's say, in Germany, France. I asked people, I could ask you also, which is your happiest decade in India. And people voted in the audience, and sometimes, yeah, I was right.
So I think for Italy, it's 1960s, right? So there's a little map as well, and you have the map of Europe with the different decades. Which would you say was the toughest one to decide? Which country? Which country did you find it most difficult to come to a decision?
Bulgaria was one of the most difficult country. I must admit, and that's why in Bulgaria we have chosen 2 decades, one from 19th century, one from 20th century, but yeah, you will see more in the book. But also it wasn't easy to predict which decades will choose Germany, because we had 2 Germanys, and I decided that it would be late 80s, early 90s, or even I suggest one option, to have the same eve of the falling of the wall, 9th of November 1989, and on the 10th of November they should build the wall again, and on the 9th of November to ruin it again, because the happiest period, the happiest moment is not when you are free. The happiest moment is when you are just a minute, a second before the freedom. Then the energy is great.
That's wonderfully said. So I think this book, of course, it is about migration, but migration in time and not in place. And that's what comes out very poignantly. But there's also so much about aging and about Alzheimer's and losing memory. And you have this very beautiful line that I just want to read out. It feels like somebody has cut the power to the rooms of your own body. And I think that's a very touching description of old age. So again, what was it like to research this? Who were the people you were looking at while writing this? Were you looking at your own future?
Okay, first about the migration in the time. What I think is that now we are facing something very interesting in the last decade. The time became more important than the space. The world, the world is reachable, but the time is not. The time is still like to find America again. The time is, we pretend to live in the 60s, not to live in the specific place. When you come back to your childhood, when you come back to the house of your childhood, you will see that there is nothing there. The house is empty, let's say. Because what you miss actually is not the house, it's the time of your childhood. It's the time of 73rd or 75. That's why I think that it will become more and more important to reach different times. Nostalgia change a bit. You know the etymology of nostalgia, you know that this is invented word in 17th century from a Swiss doctor. It was invented as illness, and the etymology is like this. Nostos is home, coming back to the home. Algos is pain. So you have pain, you feel nostalgia to the specific place, to your home. What we are facing now, I could say it's like chronostalgia. You have algos, you have drive to the different time, not to the home anymore. And this is something that it could be important, I think, in the next years.
And the second part of the question about researching old age?
About Alzheimer, I tried to avoid this. I forgot the second part, yeah, because it's a book about Alzheimer.
About forgetting.
Yes, that's right. But now, this is a very serious problem, actually. And this is every 3 seconds we have a person who is suffering from Alzheimer. And it will become more serious problem because the people are aging, the society are aging more and more. And just one example. One of the problems now in some hospitals for old people, in Canada, let's say, is that there are people who are suffering in Auschwitz when they were young, very young, like 10, 15 years old, and now they are about 80s, 90s. And when their memories come back, they are again in their concentration camps, in their body. And it's a big problem when these patients see the doctors in the hospitals, on when they listen the steps of these doctors, because this remind them something else. So this is a very serious, very, very serious problem. And when I finished my novel, I had few very important discussions. I was invited to discuss the topic with the neurologist of Bologna University, and we talk about this, how storytelling, how stories could bring back memory, how you could use stories into the science, into the curing of Alzheimer, because stories, like music and like smells, they are also big unlockers of memory. When I tell you my story, you will have some memory about your story, and so on and so on. And it was very, very, very good discussion. And this is very important, by the way, what happened in literature and other fields of the science now. I think that people from different science and people from literature really realize that they should work together, that they share one and the same field. And this is important, and it will happen more and more, I think.
You mentioned how you spoke to neurologists. These are, of course, men of science. But you also spoke to theologians, men of religion. And I'm just curious, what were sort of those discussions like?
Yeah. I had also very good discussion with theologians about the book and about the end of the time. It was about the apocalypse, because the apocalypse is not just, it's not the end of the space. The apocalypse is the end of the time. And the end of the time means that the time goes in the circle, that you have represented all the periods of the history and the future at the same moment. What we are facing now, in a way, you can see 90s, 60s, 70s, and the future and the same moment. And this was very interesting talk also with the theologians, because there is a lot about the time and the end of the time in this book. And there is also a lot about one very important year in 20th century, 1939. 1939, 1st of September 1939, when the Second World War started. I think that this year is like black hole in the 20th century. Everything circulating, gravitating around this year. And I quoted this famous great poem by W.H. Auden, September 1st, 1939, which starts like this: I sit in one of the dives of 52nd Street, uncertain and afraid. This uncertainty, this age of anxiety, which you could feel in 1939, you could feel now, and it could say something to us.
I just have one more question, and then we'll open it out. But you know, we're talking about men of religion or people of religion, and you write in the book, which is something I had never noticed, is how we have no gods for memory and forgetting, like in the myths. And that's so interesting, because you know, especially in Greek mythology, you have a god or you have a muse for everything. But for memory and forgetting, we don't. So why do you think so? They just forgot? Or
There are some pages in the novel dedicated to this, also to the idea that maybe God is actually a cloud with myriad megabytes of memory. Because, you know this saying by Dostoevsky, if there is no God, everything is permitted. My character says in the novel, if there is no memory, everything is permitted. And it's not good. The memory is like a red line, which puts some boundaries, important boundaries, not to mixing times. When you know that people, that your parents are alive, your friends know about you, you will not make some stupid things, because they remember you, and this memory will save you from crossing some borders. And that's why, yeah, God could be like a cloud of memory. But it's interesting that I didn't find in the European mythology, let's say, in the Greek mythology, a god of memory.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
You know, when Odysseus, is it correct to say, from Omir, Odysseus, when Odysseus came to his home after 20 years, his wife doesn't recognize him. The only creature that recognizes him was the dog.
Wonderful. I think we'll open it out to questions. Okay, I saw the green sweater first, the gentleman with the green sweater, and then the lady in front, yeah. And then the blue sweater in the glasses, yeah.
Thank you very much. So I work in technology, and I couldn't help but notice the similarities with your ideas against metaverse, the fact of living in alternate realities. Did you think about that, or maybe any comments from you on the intersection of the two?
Yeah, exactly. Metaverse. Yeah.
No, my novel dealing with the past, and the past metaverse doesn't exist. So I now I'm thinking about this, of course. But when I wrote my novel, other things were more important for me. Yeah, maybe in the next novel I could write about this, and I will answer properly.
Sorry, I don't know who has the mic.
Thank you very much for an unbelievably interesting perspective, very interesting. What I wanted to say is you've been researching about the happiest decades of different nations. And also you voiced your utter dismay at the present juncture, which should be probably true for the whole, what is happening, we all know. But at the same time, most paradoxically, our country is being hypnotized into a situation where many of us have started believing that we are living in the most glorious of the times. So is it possible to have people evaluating their times in a hypnotized manner rather than with all their senses this thing?
Sorry, what was the last part? Is it possible for
For the people to, supposing I am asking
Mike,
Indian,
sorry.
asking an Indian, which is so, if they say it is this decade, that is the happiest decade, it may be a result of a pure propaganda type of a thing that we are going through, of not only a very glorious past, very glorious, very distant past, which cannot be confirmed or unconfirmed or whatever it is, but also somehow that thing has been drawn to present also. As if there is this big continuum of glory that we've been living. So, can it be just illusionary, not real? I don't know. I'm not sure what I'm able to put it, but
I think just about the age, the idea of the golden age continuing.
Please ask me simple questions. It's Sunday morning. Only Sunday questions.
Maybe just the idea of the golden age continuing.
No, if I catch it correctly, it's about the. No, I didn't catch it correctly.
So if I understand, you're just talking about how the golden age continues, right? From the past to the present.
it is continuing. We are hypnotized into a situation.
Okay. Sorry, I think we're going to move to the next question.
We will talk after that. Yeah.
There's a gentleman in the glasses, yeah.
Hi, so in the third part of your book, you say language endured everything like a beast of burden. It didn't revolt because it remembered the time before we existed or because it has no memory. What do you mean by language existing before our existence or language having a memory of its own?
Thank you for this question. I really believe that our language is more clever than us. Our language has memory from before us, and sometimes when I'm writing my novels, I could share this. I don't write like professional novel writers. I don't have strong idea what will happen in this episode, what I will write about on Sunday, next Sunday, and this. I don't have this periodic table, Mendeleev's table of the subject of the topic. I believe of the language, because I'm coming from poetry. I really believe that if I catch the language, if I follow the language, the voice, I will be more close to the things that I want to share, that I want to write. And yeah, I believe that language has memory from before us, and it's even logical.
Sorry, there's a lady at the back.
Good morning. In your book, you wrote that when you have no future, you vote for the past. And this morning you said it again. And I was wondering if you could pinpoint the moment where the future stopped being appealing and the past started being more appealing for politicians and again.
When you can't see the future, you vote for the past. So can you pinpoint the moment when that happened, when people started thinking of the past as more beautiful than the present? So when did the past become more important than the present? Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not sure if I get correctly your question, but the connection between the past and now is, how to say it, it's very strong, and there is kind of formula. Some scientists says that usually we have nostalgia to the past, which is like 3 or 4 decades before us. In 2023, you will feel nostalgia to the 1980s in the fashion, into the music, and so on and so on. But what you are asking is maybe a political question. You know, I think that nationalistic movements now in different countries, they really feed from our forgetting of the past. It is the irony. Less memory produces more past. Yeah, when you don't remember, the past just comes. That's the idea, and that's why they prefer we not to remember, because they easily could sell us the past that they invented for us. So the opposite idea is the idea of the literature. We tell stories like antidote of the propaganda. If I tell my stories about the weak people, the people without power, I think that I will prevent them from the poison of the propaganda. We are fighting, literature and propaganda nowadays are fighting for the same thing, for the human being, of course. And the idea is that we should tell our stories more seductively than they do, because populists know how to tell their stories. They are very good storytellers, but we must be better than.
Wonderful. I think one last question. Sorry, the gentleman there.
Short, concise question, please.
Okay, then I will answer without question with a story about...
You like the question.
Ah,
I promise you. You talked about living with your grandmother. What is the role of time now in establishing connections between different generations, teenagers, parents, grandparents? What's the role of time now?
What's the role of time in establishing a relationship?
establish the connection. You know, my daughter is 17, and she loves to listen with her friends, Beatles, Doors, all the music that was important for me, that was important for my parents. And because you asked about my grandmothers, I just had the idea to finish with this story about the Bulgarian irony connected with my grandmother. When I was a kid, I had a strong headache and earache, and I starting to cry, I will die, my grandmother, I will die. And she started to console me. She said, you will not die, my boy. First, I will die. Then your grandfather will die. Then your parents will die. And then you will die. So this is the Bulgarian consolation.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Georgi Gospodinov.
Please join me in one more warm round of applause for Georgi Gospodinov.